All right, guys. Today we're going to talk about docstrings and modules, and basically this is like varsity version of commenting. So I'm sure you've noticed that when you hover over certain things on Rappel or when you start typing into VS Code, oftentimes it like provides an autocomplete kind of thing with a little bit more information. So like if I look at maybe these is instances that I've got up on Rappel here, I get this like description in text of what this thing does. And that seems really handy. And at this point with my little pet inheritance program, I've reached a level of complexity where I'm kind of starting to forget what some of this stuff does. Even though it's written pretty clearly, and even though I didn't even really comment this thing because it's all pretty straightforward, I'm running into this like, oh, I forgot what that thing does, or, and this is only what? This is 60 lines of code. If I was into the hundreds, like a lot of students for their midterms will turn in things that are a couple, 300-400 lines of code long. And by that point, you've lost a little bit of complexity, and this file is just getting kind of hard to find stuff in. So today we're going to work on like kind of file management. And by that, I don't mean like managing where the files are on your hard drive. I mean like managing your readability. And so readability is going to be one of our kind of key like Python goal today. So to that end, we're going to learn two things. We're going to learn how to put stuff in a separate file and import it so we don't have to be bothered with reading all of it. We can just like get the names. And when we do that, we need to have some kind of a plan for how the hell I'm going to know what stuff does once I'm not looking at it anymore. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in some docstrings. So I've got up here at the top, I've got some like version control stuff going. This is not the best way to do version control, but I need you guys to have access to everything forever. So I'm doing version control this way. It's probably dumb. The previous version is linked in there or is available in there if you copy and paste that link. I have also put the Python enhancement proposal link that deals with docstrings in here. So Python enhancement proposals are like features that people think could be added to Python, and a lot of them have been added to Python. And so some of these are a good source of information. So the two that I look at the most are PEP 257, which is this one. This is the docstrings convention. And this is just because I'm not good at docstrings yet, so I have to like go look at it once in a while. I encourage you to read this thing through in its entirety. I'm going to talk just a little bit about it, and I'm going to say some of the things that are in here. If anything I say is contradicted by what's in the docstrings convention PEP, you should go with the docstrings convention PEP because I'm, again, not a total expert on docstrings. Like, I'm still pretty new to them. The other one that I go to fairly often is the Zen of Python, which is PEP 20. And this is just guiding philosophies for Python. If you want to take a minute and read these at some point, I encourage you to. It's a good idea. The one that I'm kind of focusing on today is readability counts. So in furtherance of readability, let's go figure out what a docstring is. So I'm going to first put some docstrings in here, and then I'm going to move this stuff into a little module. So first things first, I have my pet class, right? And then I have my cat class, and I have my dog class. And I notice that if I do something like, let's see, what's a built-in class? Let me look at the isInstance function here, or the object. Okay, so if I hover over object, it says the base class of the class hierarchy, when called, it accepts no arguments, gives new featureless implements, yada yada. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to emulate when I document my classes. Oh, and I guess I can delete these couple of comments that are from old code before I refactored. Okay, so I'm deleting those. And up here at the pet class, right, the way you start a docstring is you put a triple quote and then go a couple lines and put a triple quote. Okay. Now this first line is the summary line, and that's so if I hover object again, that's this line that says the base class of the class hierarchy. Okay, so for the pet class, I'm going to write something like pet class represents a household pet. And then that first line by convention ends with a period. And if this is a thing for if this is a summary line for a function, it should be phrased in a command form rather than a descriptive form. So right now I have kind of a descriptive form here, which is probably that form. Okay, so then come kind of further descriptive lines. So if I go down and look at the object one again, I have when called it accepts blah, blah, blah. So in my descriptive line for the pet class, I'm going to write contains name, weight, color, attributes, and a say hi method. Specific extensions should be based off this class. It is not intended for independent use. Meaning, I guess actually I should maybe say that otherwise. This is intended only to be a base class. Right, in other words, I don't intend to make any instances of this class. The only thing I intend to do with it is make bases. And that's kind of, if I was looking at this, that would be fairly obvious because the say hi method takes a parameter and can't just be executed. And the parameter is this greeting, which should really be customized by kind of species in my head, right? So if I want to kind of docstring my class, that's my class docstring. And now I get, if I hover pet, I'll get all that stuff. You guys see why this is useful? Because now I can add these kind of custom reminders to myself, right? Or to anyone else who might want to use my pet class. I'm sorry, I can't say that with a straight face. No one wants to use this shit. It's a really bad example. Okay, so if I wanted to comment my cat class the same way, right? I'm remembering it's 3 double quotes and then a summary line. Okay, so 3 double quotes and a summary line. So my summary line in this is going to be the cat class, and it's a little bit important that you follow the same capitalization conventions here. Don't get fancy with your capitalization conventions, because if for whatever reason your little module takes off in popularity, people aren't going to go in it and read the code. They're going to read the doc strings. And if you capitalize a variable that's not capitalized in the code, they'll be real confused because capitalization matters in Python. Okay, so the cat class extends the pet class, and that's probably good enough for a summary. Oops. Right, that's probably good enough for my summary. And now I can get in my kind of, why did I get a weird, okay. And now I can get in my summary, or not my summary. Summary is the first line. Now I can get in my description here. So how does it extend the pet class, right? So I'm going to say that contains also very, let's see, extends pet attributes by inside and declawed booleans. Let's see, and then it also adds a say hi function, right? So it really overwrites the say hi function. Also, provides an enhanced say hi function. That's not a function, Joe, it's a method. Okay. So that's my kind of description for the cat class. And then I might do a similar thing for the dog class. So I'm just going to copy that thing and paste it in here, and then make sure that I say that it's the dog class that extends the pet class. And this extends by a caller boolean. And on that one, I need to say that it always defaults to true. And that's probably poor. Oh, and this is one that I probably want to follow that convention, right? And I want that to actually be capitalized true. That is PS probably not great coding on my part. I really should do that a different way. Let me do that right now. So if you want to make something default to true, you do something like comma caller equals true. And then set this to caller. And what it does when you set a variable in here with an assignment in there is it says if it's not assigned by the function call, it'll just default to this value. So that's an object. Be a little careful with that. There's some subtleties there. If you set this equal to a function evaluation, it'll always read the same function evaluation. If you set it equal to a list, it'll always point at the same spot in the memory. So you want to be a little careful with these default values. But that's I'll get into that in another lecture. Don't worry about it. Okay, so now I've got my dog class kind of. Okay, so it extends pet attributes by a caller boolean. That's cool. Also provides for an enhanced say hi method. That's really not true. I mean, I guess it kind of is. And it provides a swim method as well. Okay. Cool. And so now I see if I hover over dog, I get this kind of laundry list of stuff here. And I see that when I hover over the say hi functions, I don't get that stuff. I could put doc strings in there too. So if you wanted to say comment one of these guys, you could also do this docstring style for that. And it should be noted that the docstring style commenting is kind of a pain in the ass to read, but the hover over makes it really useful, right? So what you really, really, really want to do here is make readable code. And right now, if I added all of these docstrings into all of these methods, this thing is going to get less readable because it's just going to get real long. Now, I can do better than what I'm doing right now. So let me put this stuff in a separate file. Because really, frankly, if I'm doing a good job with these docstrings, I don't need to look at the code too, right? I certainly don't need the docstring and the code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to relegate this stuff to an external file. An extra. I'm going to relegate this stuff to another file that I'm not going to open very often, right? Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to over here make a new file, and I'm going to call this file pet.py, and I'm going to do lowercase. Okay, now pet.py is a Python file, and it's a separate one. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to grab all the pet class stuff, right? So I'm going to start with this line, and I'm just going to grab all of the kind of class documentation stuff, right? I'm going to cut that out of here, and now it's going to start yelling at me that there's a whole bunch of undefined stuff. I'm going to go into the pet Python file. I'm going to paste all that stuff in here. Okay, now I'm going to go back into main, and it's still complaining. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to from pet import, and let's see, I really don't need to import pet. I just need to import dog and cat. Okay, now let me prove to you that this is still working. Okay, oh, and I probably don't need my kind of type checks at the end there. Oh, and actually, that is interesting. So notice this. When I called the print out the type of rumor, right? Rumor's a cat. And cat exists in the pet file, right? So it's telling me where, even where that class exists, right? So it's saying the pet module has the cat class in it, and that's what rumor is. Rumor is a cat out of the pet module. Okay, so this is one option. It should be noted that when you import an entire module, it runs all the code in the module. So if that module were to contain something something unexpected, something malicious, something like executable lines that you didn't intend for execution, you want to import just functions themselves. Don't import the whole thing. I tend to import functions just one at a time, but that's because I believe in this in this line, which is that explicit is better than implicit. So instead of importing a whole bunch of shit that I don't need, I'm going to import exactly the things that I need because that's explicit to me. And I think personally that that's also falling into simple is better than complex. Read these if you want to. They're actually a lot of fun. This thing about unless you're Dutch is a reference to the guy who created Python. Okay, so if you want proof that importing a module can execute code, you can import this, which it says that it's imported but unused, right? But if I hit run, I get the Zen of Python printed out. And the Zen of Python is this kind of Easter egg, right? So that is actually running code. And so you want to be just a wee bit careful with what you're importing, right? Okay. So now I do note that when I hover, uh-oh, maybe I broke my repel. Let's try a reload quick. Come on. If you're using VS Code, the Python scripts that you're importing should be in the same folder. Okay, so now let's double check my. Come on. Come on. It was working just a minute ago. Where'd my. Come on, where'd my PyFlix go? Okay, so I don't know why, but repels PyFlix turns off every once in a while. So as you can see now, I'm getting those docstrings notes from the other file, right? So when it imports the idea of a dog, it also imports that docstring, and then the hover over now lets me kind of see this stuff, right? So I'm noticing too that I probably didn't need to set the default in there. You'll also notice that it's not yelling at me, right? That Indy doesn't, that Indy's constructor doesn't have a caller variable, right? So that makes it a kind of optional argument. That is PS a trick I just learned, which is freaking rad. You do need to be careful with that. There are some subtleties. Okay, so if I want to get my doc strings working for my like swim method, like right now, come on. Right now, if I hover swim, I only get swim self, right? Which isn't a super useful comment. So I want to get that that hover over giving me some more useful information. So I go into the pet file, right? And now when I'm commenting a function, right? I don't want to comment a description, and I don't want to say something silly. So one, it's a command. So say hi, right, is a function that doesn't says hi, right, because that's a description. It does a command, which is print a customized greeting, period, right? So that's what it means. When I call that thing, what it's going to do, what is it going to do? It's going to print a customized greeting, right? So that's a command, right? And ends with a period. And so that's this is what's called a single line docstring, right? So that's just the summary line. And if I want to include a description of kind of more stuff, like what are good arguments or what's the philosophy or that kind of thing, I would then hit enter and leave a blank line in between and then type some description, right? So that'd be something like in here, right? I'd be typing something like, this is a description of what the function does. Right. And really, I've already got this print a customized greeting thing, so that's probably not useful. This thing doesn't accept any parameters either, so this is really a kind of a poor function to try to describe. But that would be the kind of form of it. So if it took an integer, right, it might say like something like num, the number of dice to roll, if I was doing a die roller. And then I'd have something like sides, the number of sides each die should have, and then maybe some kind of note, must be greater than 1 or something, right? So this is a good spot to put in that kind of convention. And if it defaults to something, you do something like defaults to 1, right? If you look in here, there's some more of those. So if I like scroll down here, so here's some kind of argumentation for that. This is nice syntax, actually. I should do that. Okay. And then one thing about it is that if you're looking at this PEP list, like a C style description where you just put in like this thing's name and AB does thing, I don't find those to be particularly useful because when I hover over it, it tells me what it's intending to take. And Figuring out what it returns is not particularly hard. I can just run type on the return. Um, so I don't find that to be very useful. What I do find to be more useful is some of these like English descriptions. So, it does something and then returns whatever, right? Um, so some of the like a more useful and less descriptive or sorry, a more useful and less specific answer is often the better one here because this really is about readability. Okay, so that's my print a customized greeting thing. The init method, let's see, so, no, why are those all, huh, oh, oops. Okay, those all got an extra space because, or an extra tab here because reasons. I haven't set up my VS Code right, and I copied and pasted this. So for my initialize method, I probably just write initialize an instance of, and right now I'm in the cat class. Stop that. Okay, and then as far as description goes on this one, I have at least a couple variables that I'm intending to take. So for name, that should read something like, this is a string, right? What the hell? Stop that. So if I'm kind of following along with my documentation, it's like, okay, so that's the imaginary part or the real part, or okay, so that's the name as a string. Right, so that's the pet's name as a string. And then weight, I'm gonna write in pounds, right? And color, I'm gonna write color as string. Okay, so now if I go back into my main method and hover cat, right, I get this thing about the pet class, right? Oh, and oh, that's kind of sad. Okay, so if I want to find out if I want to look at my, if I want to look at the docstring for the initialize method, I need to look at it here. So I have initialize an instance of the cat class, name as a string, weight in pounds, color as a string. It seems, yeah. It seems like I should probably end those with something. Let's go look at the pep. Okay. Doesn't seem like they're designed to end with something with style guide, but I might do this just because I can. And now when I hover that, I'll get name as a string, comma, weight in pounds, comma, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this PS is a cheap trick that you can use to look at the init method, right? I'm not even making an object here. There is a cat being created here, but then it disappears. Okay. So you might go through and add some of these kind of descriptors to your other methods. For instance, actually none of these really. So I'm going to take my customized greeting, I'm going to put that in here. And for swim, maybe write narrate dog swimming. And I suppose I don't really need narrate dog because I'm not doing something specific to dog there. So I'd really narrate swimming. And again, that's a command, right? It's not narrates, it's narrate. And then if I go back into my main method, I'll see that when I call indy.swim, I get, oops, come on, narrate swimming. Okay, so this has been Docstrings and Modules. Be careful importing, when you're importing modules, make sure that when you're creating a module, you don't accidentally leave little bits of executable code in there. And also make sure that you're importing the things you intend to import. Do please note that if your modules have, or if the things in your module have functions in them that depend on having other external modules loaded, you will have to import those modules in here as well. So if you need a die roller, right, and in your main method you've imported randint, you will still need to import that in the module, and you can just do that import at the top. And that's literally just so it knows where to look in the namespace. Do avoid. You will see sometimes people doing this thing where they import star. Star imports are a terrible idea because they fill your namespace with garbage. And you don't know which garbage they've filled your namespace with. And so now you have this problem that you have a whole bunch of initialized variables, methods, and functions, and you maybe don't even know what they are, and they might be overwriting things or might be duplicating things that you already have. So if you try a star import in here, it's gonna kind of soft yell at you. It's not a real hard yell. I would really stay the hell away from star imports. They're not a good idea, especially if you're importing multiple modules full of stuff. You're begging for problems. So don't do star imports. How about that? All right, guys, go ye forth and tangle Python code.